Welcome inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Dan Hope joined by Andy Anders as we got the news we were expecting to get today that Ohio State has a starting quarterback. That starting quarterback is Julian Sayin. No surprise there.
No, I would say it's what we've been predicting all offseason, right? And this was clearly a close competition, I think. I believe Ryan Day when he says that was the indication. But it was the things that we've heard about all offseason, really in every quarterback competition we've seen under Ryan Day. Consistency. Ryan Day praised a lot of Julian Sayin's accuracy. We heard from Matt Patricia, who talked about how good he's been at communicating in the huddle, which we know was a big thing, how good he's been at communicating and identifying defenses. Seems like the processing is something that stood out to Matt Patricia, which is something, you had some questions about with Julian coming off of a few rough spring practices. The spring game performed well, but only was seeing like two defenses in that scrimmage. So the things that Ryan Day was looking for, clearly Julian was able to separate himself over the course of preseason camp, and now he's ready to roll into Texas.
Yeah, we have to remember this is a guy who's in his second year of college football. He didn't play much last year, so there's a huge difference between last year. He's taken mostly third-team reps. He knows, barring multiple injuries, he's not going to get into a game and play major snaps, to now all of a sudden you're competing for a starting job. So I don't think it's a surprise that there were some growing pains for Julian Sayin this offseason, that it took him some time to get to where Ohio State needed him to be that starting quarterback. And again, I do think that a lot of it is a credit to Lincoln Kienholz. I think Lincoln Kienholz showed a lot of improvement this offseason. Ryan Day said he still thinks Lincoln's only really scratching the surface of how good he can be. A guy who was a free sport athlete in high school, now focusing on just playing quarterback. They've seen a lot of improvement from him. I think they feel good about Lincoln as the number 2 quarterback. Ryan Day even floated the possibility, or at least replied affirmatively when someone else floated the possibility of a possible package for Lincoln Kienholz to utilize his athleticism. So you never know what will happen over the course of a year, but it was important for Ryan Day to come out today and name a starting quarterback, because that Texas game is 12 days away. You have to get to a point now this week, especially next week, where you have one quarterback taking the majority of the first-team reps. You really start to build rhythm around that guy. And Julian Sayin now, it's on him to be that guy at 12 days from now when Ohio State plays Texas at the Shoe, number 1 versus number 3, or number 1 versus number 2, whatever you have it. We're going to find out very quickly what Julian Sayin's all about.
Oh, absolutely. And I think naming the starter important, and it was funny too, because it was really the only position where Ryan Day was willing to come out and say this guy's the starting among Ohio State's position battles today in his press conference, when he talked about the offensive line, when he talked about the safeties, even punters now in open competition, it sounds like. Left thing, even if they have who in mind who the starters are or will be, Ryan Day wasn't saying that as front-facingly as he was coming out, started the press conference today. Julian Sayin is the starting quarterback. And I think that's important when you have a locker room that knows behind the scenes, hey, this guy's leading, this guy is going to be the guy. You want it to face in the public so you don't have to have that uncertainty anymore. And like you said, you can start scheming and building the plan around that guy, what his talents are. But at those other positions, I think Ryan Day was willing to name Austin Searveld the starting left tackle, which we kind of knew already based off the fact he was exclusively working there and is clearly going to be a starter for Ohio State this fall. Also talked about they're going to rotate guys on the offensive line just like they did in the college football playoff. And look, if you sat here and asked me a few years ago, is it a good idea to rotate offensive linemen, I would have said no. But this is the current day of college football, and Ryan Day has been willing to break this convention in the past that, offensive line is not normally a position you rotate at to try and maintain cohesion for that unit. But they got their best offensive line play of the season, at least after the season-ending injuries to Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin that occurred several weeks apart, by rotating guys at guard. And so to do it again this year makes a lot of sense. Keep bodies fresh where you can. Again, we don't know exactly what it'll look like yet. Have a good idea at certain positions, but 6 or 7 guys will be ready to play. And another interesting thing, he said 3 running backs are ready to see action. Wouldn't identify who those 3 running backs are, but maybe a third man has entered the fray alongside James Peoples and C.J. Donaldson to get reps this year.
Even if Ryan Day wouldn't say outright who the starting offensive line was, I mean, I would be very surprised. We know Austin Searville will be the starting left tackle. I'd be very surprised if Luke Montgomery's not the starting left guard, Carson Innsman's not the starting center, and Tegra Shabola is not the starting right guard. I expect those guys to start and play the majority of snaps there. I think the big question position right now is that right tackle spot. It does feel to me like Philip Daniels is surging in that competition. Ryan Day said, we do know who the 5 guys are most likely. If I'm sitting here right now, I would guess we're going to see Philip Daniels take those first snaps at right tackle. Based on what Ryan Day said today before rotation, I think we're going to see Ethan Onionwa play in some capacity. The question is what capacity? We know he's been taking reps at left tackle, right tackle, guard. Could we see him mix in at multiple positions? I feel like Ethan's going to probably be kind of that 6th man on the offensive line. If you talk about 6 or 7, I would assume the 7th guy in that equation is Joshua Padilla. Mm-hmm. Do we see him, whether it's at center or guard, do we see him working on there on the interior offensive line? I think you would look at those being the 6 or 7 that are going to play in some capacity. I mean, you do need to have a 5 you feel really good about going against Texas. This is a Texas team. I mean, the AP just announced its preseason All-Americans today. This is a Texas team that has 3 preseason AP All-Americans on defense. So you got to have a 5 you feel really good about. But if you think that rotating in Ethan, rotating in Joshua Padilla can elevate that offensive line play, and like you said, it worked in the CFP last year. That's evidence that it certainly can work. So we'll see what happens with that unit here in 12 days. Like you said, that is interesting. Running backs, we know James Peoples, C.J. Donaldson are going to lead off that equation. I would guess that Bo Jackson is the 3rd guy in that group. He just lost his black stripe this past week. He had a really good spring. I don't rule out that Turbo Rogers could be a guy that gets in that equation at some point here, but I would guess if a 3rd running back's going to play against Texas, I would guess it would be Bo Jackson.
That would be my guess, too. We saw it all spring from him. We saw it in the spring game. A few brief flashes in fall camp again. Just the burst, the speed. He's got something different. And is going to be an amazing player and could be from day one getting reps. Exactly how that rotation will work. Day, again, declined to specify, is leaving it up to Carlos Lachlan. Says his phone would start buzzing with some angry texts if he gave anything away in that regard from Lachlan, who likes to keep his room very much constantly battling with each other in competition, always fighting for reps, that sort of thing. It was interesting to hear from Matt Patricia today, too, talking about the safety battle. He and Day both saying that Jaylen McClain and Malik Hartford are both going to play regardless of who ultimately actually wins that strong safety competition. But, two, hearing about him talk about how he's going to deploy his linebackers in this defense, or James Laurinaitis' linebackers, I should say. But the Ohio State linebackers in this Matt Patricia scheme, the versatility, and I think that was a theme, a thread that's been woven throughout this offseason. You have guys in the back 7 of this defense with a lot of different skill sets who can do a lot of different things. Asking about Caleb Downs playing that big nickel role and getting him closer to the line of scrimmage and letting him do some of the things that he can do there. There's a lot of moving chess pieces with this defense. We've talked about it a lot, but it's clear that they're starting to find a plan for some of these guys and the versatility that they have and how they can get them involved in different roles.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it in those first few practices of spring, the first few practices of preseason camp, the only ones that we were able to watch. A lot of Caleb Downs playing that nickel role. That could allow both Malik Hartford and Jaylen McClain to be on the field simultaneously. So I don't think that's just lip service when we hear they're both going to play. I think we are going to see those free safety packages. How much, that's the part that's tough to predict. How much do we see Caleb Downs playing that nickel spot versus a Lorenzo Styles Jr. or another corner playing that nickel spot? But I do think both those guys are going to be part of this defense. As you mentioned, I think there's going to be at least 3 linebackers who are going to be a part of his defense too, and Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, and Peyton Pierce. So a lot of pieces for Matt Patricia to work with on the defensive side of the ball. A lot of guys who still have a lot to prove themselves, but for a defensive coordinator who we know is going to want to do different things with different packages, rotate guys, I think the pieces are there. The depth is there. Defensive tackle remains that one big depth question mark position, but I think overall he's got a lot of talented players to work with to kind of build his defense around, and it's going to be very fascinating to see what that defense looks like against Texas. I mean, I think the good thing for Ohio State is there's really no clear blueprint of what exactly a Matt Patricia Ohio State defense is going to look like. So that allows them to get creative and maybe catch Texas off guard with some of the things that they do.
Yeah, and I expect some surprises. I expect some things to especially be very Texas specific. Arch Manning is going to be an interesting quarterback to prepare for, and how much can you invest in the film that's out there on him. Talked about that. But on the flip side of the ball too, Brian Hartline, first game calling plays, right, coming up against Texas, and he talked about that opportunity here on Monday. I think it's been cool to see his evolution in these press conferences, because Brian, when he was positioned before he got this opportunity, where he's really now the front face of the offense, he's calling the plays, etc., was a little more closed off, but he started to open up, and I think even crack some jokes with the media. Got a few laughs in the press conference rooms today. You can tell he is eager for this opportunity. He's excited to put guys in the best position to succeed, to do what you have to do to be organized as a play caller. Doesn't know yet whether he'll be in the box or on the sidelines, which I think will be interesting to see exactly what Ohio State does with him on game day. He has not been in the box before. He's always been a sideline coach, but did say he'll be prepared if he's up in the box. And really just, again, his communication, his background with Ryan Day stands out whenever you hear him talk about Day, how much he's learned from Day, the offensive genius he views Day as. The two have a rapport that they built over the course of 8 years, and I think that's going to come into play when it comes into communicating the play calls and getting the best scheme in place. But we'll see exactly how it works against Texas.
Well, a lot more to talk about here the rest of this week, all next week, as we get ready for Ohio State versus Texas. But we do finally know who starting quarterback is. The quarterback competition talk is now over. Now it all comes about how will Julian Sayin perform, and how will the entire team perform around Julian Sayin when Ohio State plays Texas in just 12 days. So lots more coverage to come on 11warriors.com and 11 Warriors YouTube channel. For now, he's Andy Anders. I'm Dan Hope. This has been Press Coverage. Thanks for joining in.